Welcome to Bike Week Radio Show.
Powered by Geico. 15 minutes can save you 15% or more on motorcycle insurance.
Bike Week Radio Show with Bobby Wooldridge, Broc Glover, and Kel Carruthers on San Diego's sports leader, the mighty 1090.
Good morning and welcome into Bike Week Radio Show on San Diego sports leader, the mighty 1090. Hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas out there, and I know you fellas did as we were exchanging some text messages over the break. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and so I know you guys all had a great time, and good to see you guys made it back here in one piece.
I'm glad to be back in warm weather. I'm not real. I can take the snow and the cold weather for a little while, but I'm a San Diego boy through and through.
Paul, good to have you back as well.
Yeah,
right?
It's nice to be back. Christmas is always a good time. I enjoy getting together with all the family and kind of relaxing for a little bit there and kind of recharging the batteries before you go back to work. So it's always a good time of the year.
Well, as the calendar creeps to 2015, here on Bike Week Radio Show, we like to look back at our 2014 year, and we really had a fantastic year of amazing guests, amazing fans, amazing sponsors, and it's always nice to reflect on some of the highlights we had. And let's just start out in February. We were joined by Supermouth Larry Huffman, and just listening to that interview, I think Paul said it, you can't have an event without Larry Huffman.
Yeah, it turns an event into a real event if he's the voice of that event.
As Supercross came out of nowhere and it came from the ashes up, Larry Huffman was right there with it. He was the voice of Supercross. He was what you remember, He's on him like a dog on a piece of meat. He's whatever. He had all the, sayings.
Like a Krishna on an airport traveler.
Exactly. And then you'd hear him at the local, automotive manufacturer ad on the radio or something. So he did voiceovers that way, but he was the voice of Supercross, no question about it. And he brought the excitement to it, and he coined a lot of people's nicknames, and we just loved it. So Larry Huffman, what a legend, and AMA Hall of Fame inductee.
Well, here it is. Take it away, Larry Huffman.
This guy, okay, when I'm growing up, I don't want him to sound like he's a lot older than me.
I am.
Okay, I will then.
And he's honest.
But I mean, there was a couple of factors you had in order to have a successful motorcycle race. A, you had the riders. B, you had the motorcycles. And C, you had Larry Huffman as the announcer.
We had to have Larry Huffman.
I don't care if you had a little competition in our parking lot out here. If Larry Huffman was there and he had a microphone in his hand, you had a real event.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I remember talking to your dad years ago up in Laguna Seca, Paul, talking about the racing and how I kind of changed things because the announcers that had come along, none of them got excited. And I came in and, hell, I didn't know what I was doing, but I got the crowd going, and that's what people seem to like.
Yeah, I'd say you were definitely excited. That's an accurate description.
So, Larry, you got to tell us, okay, you got your start. Is it true at Costa Mesa Speedway? Is that where you started in the late 60s?
My first race in '68 at Lions Drag Strip, and I noticed that I could hype the crowd and get the crowd really excited. And then the next year I got hired at Costa Mesa Speedway, and I started building on that. And then in '70 I did the Cycle World Grand Prix, or maybe it was '71, and we had a big crowd at Saddleback. And then the next year I heard that Mike Goodwin was going to put on the Super Bowl of motocross. So I tracked him down, and he was good. The AMA said he had to do three races: one in Sacramento, one at Saddleback, and one at Carlsbad. And if he passed that, they would approve him to do a race inside the Coliseum. So I called him and he said, well, I've already got lined up the guy in Sacramento, and I'll use you for Saddleback, and I'll get somebody else for Carlsbad. And I said, we might as well write the check out to me because I'll be there at the Coliseum in June of '72, which I was.
And I was there too, so that's when my first exposure to you behind a microphone, and that, I mean, that was Supercross.
What was weird was we didn't know what was going to happen, and Hollywood celebrities came out, rock groups came out, and were up in the VIP area, and we had no idea if we'd have 5,000 or 10. I think we had 28,000 announced, and it just took off from there.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, it was unbelievable to see motorcycles racing in a stadium for me at that point. I was a young kid, and it was just, and also yourself, Larry. So tell me where or tell our listeners where your background came from. Where did you first have a microphone in your hand? Maybe this could be a little tip for our co-host here, Bobby.
I just started out as a disc jockey. I mean, I had a hell of a time because I started on 64 as a disc jockey up in Idaho, and my voice was so high, my only listeners were golden retrievers. I mean, my voice was terrible. But,
especially at altitude.
Yeah. But I just went from there, and it got me into announcing, Supercross and all that, and led to television and some movies and like that. But I started out as a disc jockey because I figured that was the easiest way to get into some facet of show business and still be able to eat regularly.
Now, Mike Goodwin was a rock promoter originally. Did you meet him through being a disc jockey, or did you meet him through motorcycling?
No, the first time I ever talked to Goodwin was when I called him about the Coliseum race, and we hit it off, and he liked me, and he let me do what I could do best. And I don't know how he figured it out, but somehow it happened and it all clicked.
So, Larry, you're pretty famous for all the cliches, dog on a piece of meat. I mean, and plus you coined a different name. My understanding, you're even responsible for my nickname, the Golden Boy. Did you actually think of these and actually write them down? I mean, I had a friend of mine that used to fancy himself as kind of an armchair announcer, and he would go through newspapers and he would see headlines that were popular, and then he would write down and make up little sayings that were pertinent to whatever the local news or the current news was. I mean, did you write these things down? I mean, you had so many of them.
No, Brock. They just kind of came to me, and I don't know if I was responsible for the Golden Boy, which was a great nickname, but it seemed to work for you. They just picked them out of the air, and then when I was doing my radio show, Motorcycle World with Larry Huffman, people would call in, and Warren Reed would come up with ideas, and then I'd use them the next week at a race. So they just came out of nowhere.
I mean, the Krishna on the Airport Traveler. I mean, the dog on a piece of meat.
Fading like a swap meet T-shirt.
Yeah, fading like a swap meat. There's so many of them.
One of the greatest lines of all, and I don't know where the hell it came from, was, "He's so tough, he goes to Mexico just to drink the water."
I remember that.
And I swear to God, people still come up to me now and remember that line.
Also, back in Larry's day, he was an integral part. I think nowadays with so many audio-visual things happening during the course of a Supercross event, it's like they don't rely upon. I'm sure they could say, even if we didn't have an announcer tonight, the race goes on. I don't think that would be the case in Larry's day.
Well, you got to remember a couple things. One, my wife was a real good scorer, and if Brock or Ken or whoever got out in front, she would tap me on the wrist and look at the 18th place. It's a battle between 18th and 19th. So I'd go crazy, and I'd start building that up, and everybody would start watching the 18th and 19th place. Another thing, when I was there in 2008 when they honored me, they choreographed every moment. At 8:15, you did a Yamaha spot. At 8:21, it was a Honda spot. Back then, Goodwin would let me do whatever I wanted to do. And so the largest crowd, to my knowledge, and I think this is pretty accurate, we ever had in Supercross was at the Coliseum, 76,000 paid. And that night, I don't remember the race, but I know that I told the crowd, stand up for the main event, and damn it, 76,000 people stood up for the entire main event, and it was insane.
You're listening to Bike Week Radio Show's Best of Show 2014 on San Diego Sports Leader, the Mighty 1090. In March, we were joined by Kevin Schwantz, and this was a very fun interview. Not only for the stories, but Paul Carruthers got a little loose-lipped on this interview.
And for
if I
Bobby's delay button
Yes.
finger. Bobby had his finger going, no. He thought he was playing some
I'm
sort of...
still to this day trying to pay the fines.
Exactly. We're lucky to get
and I
shut down.
blame Kevin on that. It wasn't me. He brought it
called
out.
you out, and he doesn't even know what he's talking about. I mean, you were there. You were live. You were right there drinking right alongside of with him in Japan, and he calls you out like you weren't even there.
Well, he must have drank more than I did then.
That or you're not very
memorable
for his in his friend bank.
Well, here's our interview with the great Kevin Schwantz.
Kevin, I want to talk a little bit about your career. I was lucky enough to be 1988 at the Suzuka Grand Prix in Japan, and little Kevin Schwantz shows up and wins his first Grand Prix. I mean, you obviously won the World Championship. You've won a lot of races since. Is that the race that still stands out in your mind as like the big race?
Did you say you were there?
I was there.
You weren't there though.
Oh! Drop!
That's it. No more drinking before the show, Paul.
I was there. I have photos to prove it.
No, you weren't there in '88 because somebody called you and told you.
No, I was there in '88. I'll show you them. I wrote the story and everything.
I think you may have written the story from home. I don't think you were there, Paul.
I don't write stories from home.
Kevin's just trying to goad you into saying it again.
Anyway, don't beef him out anymore. He won't say any more bad words.
Yeah, he said that last time.
Absolutely. That race, the first one and the last one stick in my mind the most. But, I think you could show me a picture or ask me about a certain race from whenever it was, and especially the ones that I won. I remember them better than the ones I didn't win. But, that Japanese, I remember riding around behind Wayne Gardner thinking, well, Wayne Rainey's behind me. That's all I really care about, and I'm not that far behind. So second place really isn't all that bad. Next thing you know, Gardner runs off the track, and I thought, wow. And I rode around the entire cool-off lap thinking, wow, what's going to happen now? What do you do next? What's going, when you pull in, where do you go? What do you? I had no idea. So it was definitely a huge part of my career, and I guess I enjoy Suzuka so much I've even just decided again this year to go back and punish myself and do the 8-hour.
Kevin, I got to just butt in here in behalf of one of our listeners, Mark's Tune. He said, tell Kevin Schwantz I said hi. If you don't mind, ask his memories of riding a Hearst Supply YZ490 at the final Superbikers in '85.
Yeah, I remember racing really, really close with Chris Carr. I didn't see which way the leaders went. Lawson and Morty and all those guys checked out on us. But, we had a good little battle there ourselves. And, I made it to the main event. I think either finished 9th or 10th. Chris may have beat me, but I think I got the better of him. And it's funny because I went to a super camp and rode with him, and you would have thought we were racing Superbikers again. I fell in front of him, and he ran over me.
These things happen, right? By sheer coincidence, the guy who was hanging out of the helicopter with the big TV camera is in our studio right now, Dan Walsh, filming this episode of Bike Week Radio Show.
All right.
I have a feeling this isn't as exciting.
I don't know. The language is kind of exciting.
Yeah, hey, you outdid me on my beep. I throw out the S word, you got to throw the F-bomb out just to outdo me.
Hey, the FCC cops are at the door.
Coming up next, more highlights from 2014 from Bike Week Radio Show. But right now, we want to give you guys another helpful riding hint from our buddies up at Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys. Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys have been representing riders for decades. And here's Chuck Coro from Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys to provide you with a helpful riding hint.
If an accident results in more than $750 in damage or someone is injured, you are required to report the accident to the DMV within 10 days. If you don't, you could have your license suspended. Remember, report it or you may lose it.
This helpful hint was brought to you by Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys at 1-800-4BIKERS or online at russbrown.com.
Here's an idea. Bear with me. You could save quite a bit of money just by switching your motorcycle insurance to Geico. Piles of it, in fact. But there may not be a lot of room on your bike for all that extra cash. So I had somewhat of an idea. You could get one of those nifty little sidecars, pile it up with all that money you just saved, and merrily drive on your way. It's just a thought. Just off the top of my head.
Call Geico today for a free motorcycle rate quote. Geico, saving people money on more than just car insurance.
Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys are the real deal. Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys. Their entire practice is dedicated to representing motorcyclists. As riders themselves, they understand why you ride, the issues you face, and the motorcycle culture. For over 30 years, Russ Brown and his partner Chuck Coro have been helping injured motorcyclists and their families get the care and compensation they deserve. Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys also created BAM. BAM! A nationwide buddy system of over 2 million riders helping riders in the event of a roadside emergency. BAM offers free legal advice, and thanks to Russ Brown, they have staff on hand to take your call 24/7, 365 days a year. Imagine a real person answering the phone 24/7. Just call 1-800-4BIKERS for more information and to get your BAM card today. If you go down, call Russ Brown, 1-800-4BIKERS, and online at russbrown.com.
Hi, this is Kyle Petty, and you're listening to Bike Week Radio Show.
Welcome back, Bike Week Radio Show. In May, we were joined by the amazing, incredible, wonderful interview of Kyle Petty just before he went cross country. He took off right here in San Diego, and head all the way to Florida with a giant group of people. And we had the pleasure of sitting down with him for an hour to talk about the ride and just to pick his brain in general.
You're talking about something cool. I mean, here this guy is. He's just so good, and he's got so many great stories, and he's a good storyteller. We were supposed to get about 10 or 15 minutes with the guy, and we ended up for a full hour. And I know his people were like looking at the watch going, Kyle, you need to be on the other. And he's like,
That's right. He skipped over someone else's interview he was scheduled with to stay on with us.
I just feel like, you know what? It's we're talking motorcycles. I mean, this guy, I knew he liked motorcycles, but I had no idea how knowledgeable he was and how much motorcycling was of his life. He's more into motorcycling than he was into racing cars and NASCAR.
It's probably refreshing for him to talk about motorcycles because he probably is always talking about cars. So.
Exactly, and his dad and whatever. And I think he finally said, "These are the guys I want to be talking to. I don't the other stuff. Forget about it. These guys are motorcycle people. I want to be talking to them." And he hung out with us that was a nice long interview, and it was every minute of I wish we could have had more.
Well, here's some of the highlights from our interview with Kyle Petty.
So I'm intrigued. A couple of things you were telling us about. You attended the Ricky Carmichael University.
Yes.
Basically, it's
in hopes of changing your career, right?
Do you think you're going to start riding vet motocross races?
You made a lot of money racing supercross.
Oh, it was incredible. I got to tell you, man. Like I said, I started riding when I was young, and I had dirt bikes, but they all had about 2.5 inches of shock travel, so it wasn't that big a deal. I jump on this 125, and I'm thinking, I look good. I got the Fox boots. I got the shirt. I got my name on the back. I got the Bell helmet. I am looking good. I look the part. And little by little, as the day went on, I finally worked my way down to the 9-year-old group from a talent, from a skill level. And like I told you, we were going through these moguls, man, and Ricky said, you just get up on the tank, and put a little pressure on the front, pull the clutch in, pop it down in second gear, coast through the center, turn, accelerate up off. First time I barrel off in the corner, I hit the hay bales, and I'm on the other side. Second time I go through the corner, a 9-year-old runs straight across me while I'm laying in the middle of the racetrack. And then he calls me Mr. Petty.
Yeah,
so to add insult to injury. You know what I mean? But it was a lot of fun. That is probably, besides riding a bull, which was another stupid thing I did one time. That's the toughest thing I've ever tried to just step into and say.
It's tougher than it looks.
It's a lot tougher than it looks. But just to step in and say, I'm going to get on and go around this racetrack, or I'm going to get on. And, they do it at Daytona and where they run the motocross still at the Speedway there. But, I mean, the tabletops, the moguls, the jumps, it's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I could not believe how incredible it was.
Yeah, and having attended, you were talking about how that camp's a good program that actually brings the parents involved. And I've actually given some talks on my Dunlop job, talk to parents about picking the right tires for different tracks and things like that. So it is really great. The parents learn things, the kids learn things. Yeah. It's basically to keep the parents out of the kids' hair and out of their ears. But it's let the experts teach your kid. You go over there and learn something else. But they are fantastic programs, and there's actually 2 or 3 of them around the country. But speaking of yourself and parents, I mean, you grew up in NASCAR royalty. Obviously, your father, Richard, was, King Richard. And
what's it like having Richard?
Well, I'm just impressed.
Wow.
I had a lot of respect for the guy, but now he's way up there because he taking and said, here, you're going to learn how to ride and respect speed and respect the consequences because I'm putting you on 2 wheels.
On a motorcycle.
On a motorcycle. It worked for Jimmy Johnson. I mean, it worked for Jimmy Johnson too. You learn respect,
and you do, and you learn control. You learn, to control the throttle. There's so much you can learn on a bike that transfers to a car, and especially to motorsports in general. We've seen Ricky. You talk about when we were sitting here before this before we started talking about Kevin Schwantz when he came and tried and did some nationwide stuff. And it was so funny. And there's a guy named Randy Gauss, who was a flat track racer, who became a crew chief for Greg Biffle and stuff. And I will never forget meeting Janice, who's now married to Eric Almirola, Randy's daughter. And I said, your dad's a god. You know that, right? And she said, what? And I'm like, yes. I said, man, I've got magazines with his photo in it. And same with Schwantz. When Schwantz come, I'm like, oh, my gosh. Huge. These people don't even know who's walking through the garage area here. They're so caught up in the stock car side of it and the racing side. Yeah. They didn't know that part of it. So that was pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, it's been, there's certainly some ability that you learn on especially a dirt bike, because you're learning to slide something, controlling the slide if it goes too far. In a car, it has to transfer to the seat of the pants. And I remember when Jimmy was growing up, I actually grew up watching his father Gary ride, and I actually bought my first racing motorcycle from his grandparents out in El Cajon, a little K&R Kawasaki. It was Ken and Ruth Johnson, and we've actually had Gary on our Father's Day show. They were back. He and Rick Johnson, no relation obviously, but good friends. We talked about racing, and there's no doubt that the two-wheel motorcycles helps for the car racing. You certainly
definitely.
But I love the fact that your dad said that's the safer way to learn.
Safer way.
Blows my mind.
It was a safer way. I got to tell you this. I got to interject something here. Have you seen Gary lately? I'm not sure Gary ever rode a motorcycle.
You know what? We're talking. You and I
I'm
actually.
kidding, man. I'm kidding.
You and
I'm
I.
kidding. Ouch.
You and I are about.
I love Gary, man.
We're a couple of weeks apart actually in age, and yes, Gary was in his teenage years, and when I first got exposed to the sport of motocross, actually.
No relationships were ruined in the course of the production of this program.
Yes, exactly.
He is a great guy, though. A great guy.
Yes, and but he is not going to throw his leg over a motorcycle.
No, not right now.
It was, but it is fantastic that you spend so much time, and the fact that you still spend so much time on motorcycles.
It is so funny, and I tell people this, and this is true. I'm not a car guy. People come up and want to talk cars to me all the time, and I'm not a car guy.
It's not your thing.
It's not. I'm a motorcycle guy. I like motorcycles. I like the engineering that goes into motorcycles. I like everything about motorcycles. I always have. And I'm not a car guy, and I tell people this. I'm not a car guy because when I was 9.5, 10 years old, is when Chrysler came out and Plymouth came out with the Superbird and the Dodge Daytona, which was so far ahead of anything on the street at that time with that slope nose and that wing on the back and that big 426 Hemi engine in it. It's like cars will never be as cool as that.
No,
there'll never be a car, and especially when you turned it into a race car and you went to Daytona and you saw those things run, it's like, okay, I've been to the top of the mountain. In cars, I've been to the top of the mountain, So it's from that day on, when On Any Sunday came out, I was like at the theater at least once a week watching. And when it came out on DVD and VCR and everything, man, I bought like 10 copies of every one of them and gave them to friends. I'm like, you got to see this movie. If you never saw Queen or Malcolm Smith and those guys, are you kidding me? Yeah. You got to watch that stuff, and I was just always been a motorcycle guy.
And a man of my heart, because it just again we were the same age. We grew up on any Sunday. It was life changing for me, and it sounds like it was for you. I mean, he grows up in NASCAR royalty, no question about it. And I'm not a car guy. Well, you're the complete. Did your dad?
That was like the family business. My dad was a contractor. Guess what? I'm not.
You're not a contractor.
But it's funny because we had it's the King won Daytona. Early 70s.
The King, Dad.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I call him the King.
The King.
It's funny. I call him that because I worked at the race shop every day, and that's what everybody at the race shop called him. Yeah, everybody at the race shop, all the guys just.
And when you say it, they know who you're talking about.
Yeah, so it was stupid for me to call him Dad or whatever, so I just called him the King. And I think 71 when he won Daytona, they gave him a Ducati. And we had no clue what a Ducati was or what it was supposed to do.
Where it came from.
Yeah, it sat in the attic over at the race shop for about 10 years before we ever cranked it. But in the late 60s, he won a race, and they gave him – and I just bought one. Same thing. It's a blue it was a Yamaha called a Big Bear, 250cc. Sure. I thought that bike was huge. He used to put us between his legs, and we'd ride up and down the highway with it. And and I had a little green light and a little blue light. That's all I had. The headlight with just a Speedo on it is all I had. And I'll never forget sitting between his legs, riding up and down the highway with that thing. And then when as I got older, and it was early 70s, he bought a Rickman. And we never could get that Rickman to run, but God, it sounded good when we did get it to run. But he rode that Rickman all the time, and Buddy Baker drove for us. Pete Hamilton drove for us. All those guys just had dirt bikes, and they'd come over, and you'd work during the day, and I'd get off the school bus at 3 or 4, and we'd trail ride out through the woods with those guys. That's just what we did. We lived far enough out in the woods where nobody paid any attention to you. As long as you could ride on anybody's property, as long as you didn't tear up anything, and you close the
Close
gates.
the gate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so the
sure.
cows and everything wouldn't get out. As long as you closed the gate, you were good.
Did you know the King rode dirt bikes?
I had no idea.
Yeah,
I had no idea either. And so here's the guy who's not a car guy. And in 71, your dad won Daytona. But here you are. Your first race was Talladega in 79, right? On the and then you actually won in 86. You won Richmond. So a guy that's not a car guy winning at the cup level, and your last win was in 95.
It's just what he does for a job.
It's like, I just race the top level of Winston
That's how you
NASCAR
pay the bills.
cup racing, and just so I can buy more motorcycle parts?
So I can get motorcycle parts. This is funny. As I got older and I got into street bike stuff, I became a panhead guy. And I just loved the Harleys from 48 to 65, right along there. And it's amazing. You walk in the garage, and I've got jugs, and I've got cases, and I've got heads, and it's all panhead stuff. And people will come out and like, I need this. And I'm like, I probably got 10 sets of heads, but I can't turn loose of them.
Yeah.
One day I'm going to put all this stuff together.
Someday.
Sounds like Kyle's a hoarder.
I am a hoarder. when it comes to stuff like that.
You're listening to Bike Week Radio Show's Best of Show 2014 on San Diego sports leader, the Mighty 1090. As you know, Bike Week Radio Show has a very special connection with Father's Day. Our very first show was on Father's Day 2+ years ago, and we had our 2-year anniversary. And what's the best way to always celebrate our 2-year anniversary? By bringing in Paul's dad.
Your father.
Mm-hmm.
And one of us has a world champion motorcycle racing father. One of us. I'm not sure which one of us around here is that person. But we got to have a very special Father's Day show this year.
He always likes to come on with us. And
Kel Carruthers, world champion.
It's become a little Father's Day tradition for him to make the drive down, and hopefully we can keep that going.
But it's not only your dad. I mean, like we talked about being a world road racing champion and winning the race like the Isle of Man. Which is such an insane race. But he spent so many years over in Europe being a crew chief, and it's not just. Kenny Roberts, Eddie Lawson, Wayne Rainey. Just if you spend any time around guys like Kenny Roberts, stories they just happen. And if you can remember a tenth of what of the crazy stuff that goes on with a guy like that, you'd have a book and a half worth. What a great interview, and we could every Father's Day we need to have Kel Carruthers on.
Talking about Isle of Man, it's a great subject. You and I both watched the entire.
I watched them all,
every lap, and it's having never been there. Having never even considered doing what those guys do, but you have. You were there as a top guy. What year would that have been?
I won it in 1969 and 1970.
And the average speed, I think, was 99 point something?
99, yeah. 100-mile-an-hour lap was really over the top,
Which to this day, to me, it would still be over the top.
So, but I averaged 99. I had 99-mile-an-hour laps on.
And
the
describe the motorcycle you were on. You want to?
69 was on the factory Benelli, and then 70 was on my own TD2 Yamaha.
Yeah, we're talking drum brakes and treaded tires too.
Skinny tires.
Skinny tires.
One of the things that's interesting that people don't realise is the last 5 years I raced in Australia, the 5 years I raced in Europe, the same tyre was used.
The same tyre?
The exact same tyre. The Dunlop Triangular never changed in 10 years.
And they didn't give you a choice of compound, soft, medium, or hard?
There was one tyre. There was no rain tyre. There was just one tyre. It was really good because it was a thing that was out of your mind. Every time you got on a bike, the tyre was the same.
Straight up. Didn't have to learn about that
It's a pity that's not like that now because I think it would be a lot better if they could make a tyre that you just used every week.
Right. And not this potpourri, 31 flavors of tire.
Yeah, every time you get on the bike, it's a different tyre.
So, Paul, I don't recall, but what was the top average speed this year? Was it
138 or something?
138, something
138.
Like that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous if you watch it, and it scares me.
It's terrifying.
When we went the first time, I think in 2000, when I went with Dad, and I got to do a lap, and at the same time he was doing the lap.
What'd you ride?
I rode Alan Cathcart gave me an old Benelli street bike that I rode, but it didn't matter. It was just like you were just in awe the whole time, and it made me realize what because I was in the Isle of Man as a kid, every year with him and my mom and sister, but when you actually do the lap on a motorcycle, it makes you realize, like, God, how did he do this, in a race situation, I just treated it as a street ride, and it was a cool street ride because the roads were closed, so it's better than a street ride where the rides are open and you're worried about
dodging cars.
Right, but I mean, as far as racing on it, you just can't imagine it.
In 2000, when Paul was there, I rode the first of the Benelli 3-cylinder superbikes. And I hadn't been there for years and years and years, but I rode that bike around there, and it was pretty easy. The suspension worked, and
the brakes worked.
Everything was. I thought, boy, this place is a lot different than it used to be, And then a few years later, I went back and I rode a 350 Yamaha, and I thought, how the hell did we ever race these things around here? And the same this year. Well, last year I rode the 250 Benelli again, and it's like, well, this is really hard work, So I can understand now how much easier it is now with the modern motorcycles, because it's a totally different world. It's mainly the suspension and the tyres that make all the difference. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't believe how comfortable I felt back in 2000 on the 1000C, or it was 900 something Benelli 3-cylinder, compared to like the twin-cylinder 350 Yamaha. It's like night and day. One was so easy to ride, the other one was so difficult.
It's something that every motorcycle enthusiast should go to, just because of all the activity they've got going on, and I think you just go out and find a place to watch, and you just kind of hang out there, and then move around a little bit, but then you can get an appreciation for how fast they go. Like if you go to Bray Hill, it's like the closest place you can go to the paddock.
And it's like one of the premium spots to watch.
Mean, they're just going so fast down that hill. It's just it's scary to stand. And you're from me to you,
as the guys are whizzing by.
Yeah. It's kind of scary. Look, that's what makes the Isle of Man. And that course, was all the old circuits were like that too. I mean, the Isle of Man was special in that it was what it was, and also being 37 miles round, it was different. But I mean, back then we raced on regular roads. Most of the Grand Prix were on regular roads, and they were all 8, 9, 10, 11 miles round.
Just because they didn't have the big, beautiful fixed facilities that the guys have these days.
And that was just traditional, and it was, I mean, I'm no hero. I don't look at myself as being a hero, but I much preferred the races on the long street circuits than on the smaller man-made tracks.
Do you think that was shared with a lot of the guys you were racing with?
Yeah, I think so. I think guys like Halewood and that, I think they preferred the proper road racing, the road circuits rather than the circuits. And
right.
Now, of course, they don't use that. The Isle of Man is the only one that they use anymore. And, of course, it's not a world championship anymore either. So.
Well, and you mentioned earlier that the guys who excel at races like Isle of Man, they're probably not, we don't see them. It's like meeting new riders.
Well,
Guy
they're
Martin,
specialists.
Yeah, Dunlop and Guy Martin, because I've seen them, and, they're used not infrequently in advertising, but at least I'm aware of them. And we kind of pay attention to motorcycle racing. But these other guys, I wouldn't know them if they walked in the room. But watching them compete and watching them line up with these other guys is like, wow, this is the real deal.
We have a feature in this week's Cycle News that Michael Scott did, talking to some of the, not the current Grand Prix racers, maybe a Valentino Rossi a little bit, but like some of the Wayne Rainey's and the Kevin Schwantz, where they're talking about racing at Spa, where they still used to race, where the track was longer and a lot more dangerous than the stuff that they're racing on now. And you hear those guys talk about that, and they really appreciate like the old Salzburg Ring and tracks like that, where it was pretty dangerous. And I was able to break out some old photos, and it's just like you look at it now, and I mean that's still like Wayne Rainey era, but you look at the track safety even then to what it is now. I mean, they're still racing, and there's Armco barrier and hay bales pretty close, and no runoff like they have now. But it was interesting to hear them, to read them talking about how they really enjoyed those kind of circuits as well, because it kind of separated the men from the boys.
Back 1970 at Belgium, on the 250 Benelli, I lapped Belgium at 121 mile an hour. I mean, they got 230 mile an hour motorcycles. They don't lap anywhere, any tracks at anything like that speed.
Unbelievable.
It's just totally different. I mean, Kenny Roberts, for example, he hated the road circuits.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't like Belgium and places like that. I mean, I just preferred them.
You liked it?
I loved it, yeah.
Did you like it, I mean, in large part because, or other people, the intimidation level raised exponentially when you get
No,
on
I don't
race
think so,
circuits?
because when I raced, I mean, the highlight of your racing career was to race in the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a neat thing to race in the Isle of Man. It was a fantastic thing to win the Isle of Man. And I was fortunate enough to win the Isle of Man and the World Championship the same year. And probably the Isle of Man was more important than the World Championship. I mean, I get introduced to people different times, and they say, yeah, Kel was world champion. And, yeah, okay. Kel won the Isle of Man.
Like he was here today.
You won the Isle of Man. It's like, you know, that's such a big deal.
Yeah, it's a different level.
It's a different level.
Coming up next, more highlights from 2014 from Bike Week Radio Show on San Diego Sports Leader, the Mighty 1090.
Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys are the real deal. Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys. Their entire practice is dedicated to representing motorcyclists. As riders themselves, they understand why you ride, the issues you face, and the motorcycle culture. For over 30 years, Russ Brown and his partner Chuck Coro have been helping injured motorcyclists and their families get the care and compensation they deserve. Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys also created BAM. BAM! A nationwide buddy system of over 2 million riders helping riders in the event of a roadside emergency. BAM offers free legal advice, and thanks to Russ Brown, they have staff on hand to take your call 24/7, 365 days a year. Imagine a real person answering the phone 24/7. Just call 1-800-4BIKERS for more information and to get your BAM card today. If you go down, call Russ Brown. 1-800-4BIKERS and online at russbrown.com.
Here's an idea. Bear with me. You could save quite a bit of money just by switching your motorcycle insurance to Geico. Piles of it, in fact. But there may not be a lot of room on your bike for all that extra cash. So I had somewhat of an idea. You could get one of those nifty little sidecars, pile it up with all that money you just saved, and merrily drive on your way. It's just a thought. Just off the top of my head.
Call Geico today for a free motorcycle rate quote. Geico, saving people money on more than just car insurance.
Hi, I'm Larry Weiss, and you're listening to Bike Week Radio Show.
Welcome back, Bike Week Radio Show, San Diego Sports Leader, the Mighty 1090. And on August 24th, Barry Weiss joined us, the star of Storage Wars, and he came down to Schwantz Casino to do an appearance. And we were lucky enough to snag a few minutes with Barry on the phone, and what a character Barry is.
He is, and he's he's a hardcore motorcycle guy. That's the fun part about it. He's super knowledgeable, very passionate about motorcycling, and he's just he's a fun guy to hang out with. As you guys might remember, I ended up going out to Schwantz, hanging out with him during his appearance and having dinner with him, and it was he's a laugh a minute.
Well, we just had an interview. I didn't know Broc got to go to dinner with him.
Yeah, we weren't invited.
Yeah, clearly.
But no, he's a big fan. You can go to the Pomona Half Mile and see him. You can be at a road race and see him. You can be at a motocross, supercross and see him. So he just
he jumps on planes all the time. Runs the MotoGPs in Europe and whatever.
Yeah, no, he's a real big fan. So it's cool to have him on.
Yeah, he's always at the big supercrosses, local, and anywhere from about Vegas to the West Coast, you'll see him there many.
And it's funny
times.
how many people know who he is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, talking about kids being conceived on Johnny Carson or whatever and those kind of things. At our house, Storage Wars was on. Storage Wars. Not talking
TMI. Too much information.
Storage Wars was on every single night when we went to bed. Every single night.
Wow.
Things you can't unhear. You
can't unhear that one. I was like, okay.
Oh.
I wasn't sure. When you always have that thought in your mind. Are they thinking about me or are they thinking about someone else? Well, I already knew.
Here's our interview with Barry Weiss.
So, hey, Barry, question for you. In the 60s, 67, 68, what were you doing? What were you riding? And is there any truth to the matter? You were kind of the character of Spicoli was kind of modeled around you, but he was a surfer, you were a rider. Is there any truth to that?
Well, I don't know if I should be flattered or insulted at that compliment.
It's all praise. It's all praise around us.
Thank you. No, I'll tell you, as a matter of fact, I'm sitting here and I'm actually I'm in my den, and I keep this bike in my den, a 67 Triumph TR6C, which my dad gave me the bike in the 11th grade. He said, hey, man, he goes, if you go to school every day and you don't cut class once, I'll get you a brand new Triumph to race in the desert. And there was a guy named Ted Lapidakis. He was in the Checkers Motorcycle Club. He had a Honda automobile and Triumph motorcycle dealership in West LA, and you could get a desert race ready with the Harlan Bass skid plate, the Q air filter, the up pipes, all the cool stuff directly from this guy. So, and that's all I really wanted to do then, unfortunately. So I got the bike and we campaigned and whatnot. By the time I was 18, my racing career went a little bit astray. I mean, we had the Summer of Love. It was 1960, end of 67. So I was discovering other stuff besides, racing and having
literature, art.
Yeah, literature and art. What's her name?
Yeah.
But so it was kind of tough to make those early 7, 8 a.m. smoke bomb starts when I was just getting home around 4 o'clock. I mean, it was 1967, 68, and so that sort of ended my racing career, being serious about it. But it was actually a pretty good novice, and we ran the Barstow to Vegas thing, and I think my best finish was about 40th overall. I was a novice, first novice. And I've just always had a blast on dirt bikes. And then after the Triumphs, I mean, we got into the Huskies, and I had YZ, Huskies, Osas, Montesas. I had all that stuff, and really, I fondly remember those days.
Well, that's very, very cool. How many bikes do you have right now in your collection?
12 now, and it kind of always changes because I'm buying and selling and always building one. I just finished. God, it looks killer too. A 2006. It was made in 2006. Cheney, and you guys know what that is, obviously.
Yeah, sure.
Vintage motocross champ. And the welds on this bike and the craftsmanship are just like jewelry. So Cheney, the original founder, I think was Simon Cheney or Eric Cheney. I get them mixed up, but whatever it is, his son is now carrying the torch because there's been such a renewed interest over the years in vintage motocross racing, and he's still making chassis. And it's got a 750, a 1976 750 5-speed Triumph in it, and it just makes the music. It makes us so bitchin' because naturally it's, wide open. And I have it set up as a dual sport, but it's really just the attention to detail. I just got it finished, and it's a blast to ride.
Barry, when we saw the Why We Ride movie together last year with Vinnie Manzak and the group, you brought a bike there. Was that? Tell us about that motorcycle. Well,
that's kind of one of my favorite bikes. I mean, even though it's a beater, so to speak. It's a '64 Triumph, which was the first year of the unit construction. And Bud Eakins actually did a lot of work on the bike. Bud made the pipes, and they called them Eakins pipes originally because they were the 2-on-1 side pipes. And so it's got original Bud Eakins made pipes on it. It's kind of a beater type in terms of aesthetics, but it's always the one that always runs. No battery. It's off a mag. And it's another, it's an old desert sled that basically I took the knobbies off, put sort of dual sport tires on and blast around on it because I live right off of Mulholland here, so I'm always up there.
Hey, Barry, so, I'm not to harp on the Storage War things. Damn, you were the show, buddy. You're the only reason. I mean, remember Johnny Carson had talked about people at night. More kids were conceived from watching Johnny Carson. Well, that's kind of the way it is around the Glover household. My wife has always had a crush on you, and the Storage Wars is always on, and now you're not on there, so we're seeing reruns all the time. And next thing you know, there's 7 other shows that spun off of there, and none of them were as good as the original. So, do you get a cut off of that? All these people coming in and other shows starting off of there?
From your mouth to God's ears.
You got it, man. I'm like,
but I'll tell you, and I had a blast doing that Storage Wars. I did about 104 shows, and I haven't been on for I don't know, I guess a season or two. But Brock, if it looked as if I didn't take it as serious as the others on Storage Wars, it's probably because I didn't. But they did. And, they had stores, the other people I was on with, they had stores and inventories and stuff like that to worry about. Brock, can you see me running a thrift shop? I don't think so.
I can't even fathom that you actually, Doug, every time that you'd show up in some new car, some freaky looking mobile, it looked like the Oscar Mayer Wiener mobile one week, the Batmobile the next week. Those cannot all be your cars. Who did you borrow those from?
They were all mine, except there was a car I drove up in and a chicken coming out of it.
Yeah, the
and
big caddy.
that actually I borrowed from a friend of mine, and you guys may know him because he's a racer for life, is Tommy Kendall.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was Tommy Kendall's chicken car. And the other, the RV thing was built by an artist friend of mine named Randy Grubb, who's unbelievable. He's built stuff for Leno and whatnot. He built that decal liner thing, but all the other stuff was mine, you know, and I just had a blast making that show. I mean, obviously, as I said, I didn't take it too serious, and I was there looking for more unique, specific items, if you will. I mean,
what's the best thing you
if
found?
you or anyone in your family needs a filthy, dirty, stained mattress, I've got 500 of them.
Where do you keep, speaking of Tommy Kendall, I got to tell this story real quick. Tommy Kendall and I used to run into each other at races and things. One of the greatest lines I've ever heard anyone ever say anytime, Tommy Kendall says, he's watching a race and it says, isn't that odd that the Ford would come out in the current ADHD generation, they'd come out with a car called the Focus. And I just thought that was the funniest damn line. And it's just that's Tommy.
Guy is a very clever guy. He's one of my favorites, man. That guy is
He is.
funny.
He's brilliant.
And acerbic and quick-witted. And I really love his announcing style. I've known Kendall, probably over 20 years.
Yeah.
And he is definitely really a funny cat.
I can't remember what I had for breakfast. That line he said, though, is sunk in my memory, and he is so funny. He's the greatest guy to sit around and talk because he's tongue-in-cheek, a little sarcastic, and he's clever as ever. So getting back to the storage thing, do you store all this crap? I mean, what else can you call some of this stuff?
Heirlooms.
I mean, some of these people are hoarders.
Tomatoes, for Christ's sake. I was a little bit different in terms of I didn't actually clean up my own mess. I don't think that's big news or whatever, but in other words, the production company, because I wasn't in this business, seriously. I mean, those people were in this business prior. They all knew each other. And the funny thing is, I remember the first day of filming, I'd heard about these people I'm going to be on this show with, but I never met them. And I don't know if that was by design or just poor planning. I kind of think the latter. But just the first day of filming, I just meet these people at one of these storage auctions in Victorville. I've never even been to a storage auction. I've been to numerous auctions, estate sales, antique auctions, farm sales, but I'd never even heard of this stuff, this abandoned storage stuff. And the way I got into it, I didn't mean to digress, but the way I got into it was, I basically did it the old-fashioned Hollywood way, and I slept with probably 80 or 90 producers till I finally got one.
Finally found a female producer. That's a good thing.
You're listening to Bike Week Radio Show's Best of Show 2014 on San Diego sports leader, the Mighty 1090. And finally, our last Best of interview of the year that made the cut, although all our interviews were fantastic, if I don't say so myself. And if you missed any of those, of course, head to iTunes or BikeWeekRadioshow.com to check out the podcast. But once again, we made the pilgrimage up to Long Beach Convention Center for the IMS show, and we are joined by Chris Filmore, who, Paul, what is he? Is he an employee of yours now?
No. He's a AMA Superbike racer. And he'll be competing on a factory KTM in the Moto America Series in 2015.
And you're his boss?
No, I have nothing to do.
No, but
he may think that at some point.
Yeah, at one point he's like, "You're worse than my boss. Yeah. You're all over me."
I'll definitely get our money's worth out of him since we don't pay him anything, so that'll be easy to do. But Chris is a real good racer and represents KTM well. And with KTM bringing the 390 Cup on board with 14 to 22-year-olds racing in Moto America, Chris is going to serve as like a mentor, and he'll be able to answer questions and help those kids get started in their careers. So
well, and that was a great story, as well as him being rescued by the Boy Scouts.
Oh yeah, you gotta.
Chris is a good story, and he's kind of a young hipster kind of a guy, and he's got a diverse background. He's ridden all sorts of motorcycles.
His last name could be Bostrom.
Exactly.
He could be Ben and Eric's brother. He runs on his own time. goes surfing.
He's got the cool factor.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of like,
the Carruthers factor is what we call that around here.
Well, yeah.
Kel Carruthers.
Yeah,
not Paul. Yeah, Kel Carruthers.
If we put all three of our cool factor together, we could probably get to his shin.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, he's a good kid, too.
Well, here's our interview with Chris Filmore.
Let's tell a little Chris Filmore story here. I'm going to let Chris take off. But, Chris, my understanding, you went for a little off-road ride. This was quite a few years ago out there, and you had a little problem all by yourself in kind of a remote part of it. Yeah, a little scary
I've never
moment.
really done that much off-road riding. It might have been like one of my first rides, and I didn't
What
really
were you
know.
on to start with?
I was on the
Set the stage a little bit here.
EXC 500.
Okay.
I was in Utah. I started with 3 other guys, and they weren't quite the same ability level as me. So I saw the single track, and they said, yeah, we're just going to the top of that mountain. Like, you might as well go ahead. You're faster than us. I was like, okay, cool. Took off.
Tell a guy, you're faster than you're better than me. Oh, yeah, man, the ego gets even bigger, and it's like, you got it, man. I'm going right up the side of the mountain there.
Yeah, so I saw this. I saw the top of the mountain. I got there and kind of hung out, didn't see those guys, and then kind of thought I knew where I was, and I was like, I'm just going to drop the backside of this thing. It turned into like a 6-hour ride. I was running out of fuel. I crashed once really bad.
Oh, no.
Fell off the side of the trail. It took me about 45 minutes to get the bike back up, and it wasn't even that bad, you know. And
Did you think at that point you're looking, okay, where am I going to sleep out here? And
it was like, you know, hearing things in the woods. I'm like, oh, is that an animal behind me? I'm like,
was it dark at that point?
Paranoia set in. It was dusk.
Oh.
But then I ran into some Boy Scouts that were doing a 3-day hike.
Really?
Yeah. They were on a 3-day camping hike, and they were just backcountry trekking through the
you ate all their
Utah.
food?
Well, I saw them, and I was like, oh, my God, I'm lost. And they're like, you're not lost anymore. Where do you need to go?
We're Boy Scouts, and here's a compass. Here's this. I got a flare.
And they're like, okay, it's about 15 miles down there to this little town. Then you're going to hook a left, and then you'll see, like, the main reservoir.
And you're like, perfect. I don't have 15 miles worth of fuel.
I made it.
Did you?
I made it. And
so did you ever see your buddies again?
No, I never saw them. They called my friend I was staying with. Was like, hey, we didn't see him. You know, he was gone when we got to the top. And then I finally got back. I didn't have service. I was trying to look at my phone. I was like, do I take this trail? I was just riding around in the shrubs on the top of the mountain, being like, just trying to get some kind of reference point to where I was. And
have you ever, been stuck in the wilderness like that, Paul?
I got stuck on a dual sport bike, dual sport ride once, where we'd crashed everything. All the batteries were dead. We couldn't get them started. And we were down in the bottom of this gorge, and it was to the point where we were almost thinking about drinking the water, you know, that was going by in a little stream. And I'm like, oh, man, I don't want to get that beaver fever or whatever they call it.
That's what Bobby's got, beaver fever.
So anyway, we finally, they said, look, we're putting you, we got all the strength we could to push one of these things to the top of this hill. They're like, you're going on it. You have one chance to bump start this thing, and then you ride and you get out of here and you find us help. So I was full pressure, right? We got the thing started, and all I was like is, don't crash, don't crash, don't crash. I rode up to the top, found a fire road, and there was some rangers on ATVs. They came back and towed us out.
Oh, it's a scary thing when it happens. I've had it happen on a mountain bike, and actually I wasn't as lost as the 2 guys I went with. They were lost, and we didn't retrieve them until it was after midnight. It was a scary thing.
That gets scary. It started getting cold.
We were in Big Bear, and it was cold. By the time we got done, it was night. Yeah. And we were riding back. One of the bikes, we got it out, but we couldn't get it fired up. So we left the bike there, and one guy rode behind me or behind somebody else. But it was so cold, we stopped and we bought newspapers out of the rack and put them inside our jersey.
Cycling trick, yeah, absolutely.
But it worked.
And we started out on about a 2-hour mountain bike ride, and that was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it ended it after midnight. Yeah, it was an ugly ordeal in the mountains in Idaho. So, yeah, it was. I knew where I was. Like I said, I actually knew where I was. The 2 guys broke off, same situation.
They were looking for them.
They weren't in shape as much as I was. They go ahead, and we were just going to go out and back. So there's no way, we weren't going to do any loop. We were, just out and back. So there's no way when I was coming back I shouldn't have crossed them. I never did. We never found. I had to go back out in a 4-wheel drive pickup, and it was a scary deal. So that's Chris Filmore's story. Yeah. So from now on, you're not going to break off. And
as far as the superbike goes, I mean, that thing. Obviously, you're continuing it in its development.
Yeah. We constantly are. Every time we go and ride, we figure out something a little bit better than the last time. So development never stops. Even if we're not testing and we're just at the racetrack, we're constantly developing. But we had a good year this year, and it was a little bit tough. We had a couple of mechanicals, and then I threw it down the road a couple times in some key positions to step on that podium, and it's just, that,
yeah, I mean,
that's life, that's
that
racing. I know, so I'm happy to be able to get another chance to be back out there, and we'll see if we can't do it again this year.
Well, looking forward to seeing that orange bike out there racing the Moto America Superbike Series again next year. That's very exciting.
Yeah,
I think
good. It was good news that they're coming back. So.
And we need the Road Race Series to get back off a life support system, and get back into where it needs to be. And
it's a good group of riders who all want the same thing. He realizes that for the series to grow, we're all in the same boat with this thing. We got to do some work and make it happen, and everybody will prosper from it.
Very good. So Chris Filmore, factory KTM rider, and
happy to share the experiences that I had, and I'll help out as much as I can.
And always thank the Boy Scouts.
That's right. Be prepared, baby.
Well, that'll do it for Bike Week Radio Show. What a fantastic year we had. Thank you to our sponsors, Geico. Thank you to Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys for sticking with us the entire year. And we're excited to continue those relationships into 2015. Guys, I had so much fun again working with you guys this year. I can't thank you enough for bringing me along for the ride.
Well, thank you, Bobby, for working so hard, and thanks to all of our listeners for listening, because we wouldn't be a show without listeners and people and the sponsors for supporting us. And all the people log on, go through the archives, listen on the apps.
Yeah, I encourage anybody who wasn't a regular listener to become a regular listener and also play catch up. Like you said, we've got some wonderful interviews with some great motorcycling people that they can find in our archives and kind of catch up and then be with us every show in the new year.
Exactly.
Well, thank you guys again for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Of course, huge shout-outs to Mean Gene Turner and Phil Kottner and Pat Osborne, our behind-the-scenes people, as well as, of course, all of our listeners, once again, who make the show possible. And so we'll be back next year, bigger, better than ever, 2015. We can't wait to see you there.
I'm sure we'll be bigger.
Yeah. We'll see you next year. Thanks for tuning in on San Diego Sports Leader, the Mighty 1090.
You've been listening to Bike Week Radio Show.
Powered by Geico. 15 minutes can save you 15% or more on motorcycle insurance.
Join us next week for more Bike Week Radio Show on San Diego's sports leader, the Mighty 1090.